All right, hello everyone. Currently recording this on April the 28th. Going to be going over the Black Death and, if there's time, the last two slides because they're not that important in the grand scheme of things and they won't help you out for your understanding of how history was shaped. So, Europe went through a very turbulent time going into the 1300s. For some reason, the Earth went through a climate shift in the beginning of the century. Global temperatures cooled by roughly 3 degrees, and this led to massive crop failures along Europe that killed roughly about 10% of the population. The thing about famines, though, is that even really still today, when there are famines, only the poor are truly affected by them. The feudal lords and their families and the nobles and the knights were still able to get food. It's just the little food that there was going towards taxes instead of feeding the population. And with famine, typically the majority of the deaths are not caused by the actual starvation themselves. It actually takes a long time for someone to truly starve, but after restricting an already poor diet for years on end during the Great Famine, people succumb to disease and pestilence more easily. Also, during this time, international trade is springing up with the unification of China under the Mongol dynasties, and the Mongols are spreading farther west into Eurasia. Pretty much, it's the perfect storm for a mass death effect. Um, so what's happening around the 1340s, specifically 1347, is Genoese traders have a colony in the Crimean Peninsula known as Kaffa. The Golden Horde, well, not the Golden Horde, the Mongols are invading west and they besiege Kaffa. The Genoese are able to flee from the siege via boat, and they hastily make their way back to northern Italy. And as the ideas spread along trade routes, so do disease. And more than likely, the Mongols bring a form of pestilence that the Europeans had never really seen before, and that would be the bubonic plague. The bubonic plague starts in Italy and slowly makes its way around Europe. And the effects are very, very bad. The bubonic plague is very deadly. It's also known as the Black Death. What the Black Death does is, once you're infected, typically from fleas that are carried on rats, um, your body produces boils. They turn black and gangrenous. And then your body, in response, has the great idea of superheating your body, and then you cough up your lungs. And it's highly contagious, and it spreads rapidly. And it winds up killing. The high mark is 60%, but it's probably around 30%. And it winds up killing a vast swath of Europeans. And this has tremendous effects on not only just the population of Europe, but the economy of Europe as well. And the effects actually help bring an end to feudalism in some parts of the continent. And this goes on for 3 years. And they also don't know what causes it. Germ theory is a relatively new idea. Germ theory is first proven in the 1880s. Science at this time was not that great. They believed in spontaneous generation, that organisms just spawn up for no reason. The smarter individuals during this time believed that the plague was caused by miasmas or pockets of bad air. Some people thought it was divine retribution about the sins of mankind, and people went about beating themselves on the street in order to appease God. And a lot of people just blamed the Jews because that's what the people did. Um, yeah, science has gone really far. But effects of the plague. Obviously, a lot of people died. Just mass depopulation, but with the lack of agricultural production due to the shift in climate. And going to get into some economics here. For those of you that have taken econ at this high school, thank God they don't let me teach that. That'd be horrible. But supply and demand. The demand of food is going up because there's less of it, but the supply of labor is going down. The vast majority of European rulers and nobility get their money from agricultural surplus, as in they get their money and their taxes from food. Well, there's less food, which means the nobility is weakened. They have less money to go around. Also, since there are less peasants to work the land, the peasants are worth more, so they're able to argue for more rights and better wages. And effects also in the newly arising artisan class, specifically in Italy. In Italy, things are becoming more and more urban. People are going to cities. And because of this, there is a new class of artisans. Artisans are just specialized craftsmen. And since the plague hits these urban centers first, it really weakens the artisan class that was slowly emerging, and it solidifies the role of the merchant class in Italy. Italy develops a little bit differently. Instead of the landed nobles, typically you would have merchant families filling that role. But people get more rights, the nobility is weakened, and the church also weakens as well. Because if the spokesman for God can't stop the plague that you think God caused, then you're probably not going to believe him. I really thought this was going to take me a lot longer. I really did. Also, the Black Plague after the first event from 1347 to about 1350, it's still around. There are still plague outbreaks sporadically across the world, usually in countries that aren't that developed. There was a plague outbreak in Madagascar, I think, about 2 or 3 years ago, where about 800 people died. And if any of y'all ever go out to the Great Plains, please keep your hands off the prairie dogs, because guess what? The fleas on the prairie dogs carry bubonic plague. So don't do that. And yeah, church scholars. The church was still smart. People in the church could read. They copied books down. They lived in monasteries. It's the same thing we went over when we were in class. Except now they draw wacky images. But yeah, like they just write stuff down. One important thing is a lot of monasteries eventually become modern European universities. Um, the university was just an area where students would go just to learn. It's the same thing that we have with universities now. It's still very expensive, but in order to have a university, you typically would need a large library. And the monasteries, due to their age and just the prevalence in trying to obtain knowledge and the fact that the monks of the monastery would copy books down, had a plethora of books, and thus universities typically would form around them. Even in America, a lot of colleges start off as seminaries or like church schools. Harvard, for example, was originally started to train preachers. Also, they make illuminated manuscripts, which are just books that they draw fancy things around. And it allows us to see how their art develops and medieval art at this time. I doubt any of you, except for, I guess, Amy, he'd probably be interested. Um, Art takes a shift as well. So, art during the Middle Ages was very two dimensional. They had no form of depth, they had no field of view, they had no, what's the word? Perspective. They don't have perspective. So, for example, trying to see, come on, I know it's in here. Yeah, right here. Um, Everybody's the same height. Or here, the things aren't realistic. The hand is literally the same size as the body. The art isn't very realistic. Also, because of the Black Death, the art became a little bit more sinister. It kind of scarred the European psyche. And art got a little bit more depressing for a bit. And art takes a more humanist role with going on about things about the real world. Art. Also, there's an assignment that I typically would have you do. You make an illuminated manuscript. If you want to do that and like take a photo of it and put it in an email and send it to me, you can. I'll make it worth like an assignment or two. The majority of you are getting your work done, so I don't care if you want to have fun and do it. Go for it. Make it about whatever you want. Just keep it appropriate. It is not required. 100% not required. Not required. If you want to do it for fun, I'll give you extra credit. And I'm probably going to go on to lecture about the next unit today so I can play Rocket League instead of doing my job. So talk to y'all in like 10 minutes.